My stepmother said my mother's memory didn't belong in her house anymore, so I created a home that made everyone remember exactly who had been erased. My name is Brianna, I'm 28, and if you met me in real life you'd probably think I'm calm, maybe a little quiet, the kind of person who doesn't start drama. That used to be true. Before everything turned into this slow, suffocating war over a woman who isn't even alive to defend herself. My mom, Marjorie, died when I was 17. Brain aneurysm. No warning, no time to say goodbye, just a phone call during second period that pulled me out of class and ended the version of my life where I still felt safe. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room staring at the vending machine because it was easier than looking at my dad's face. He looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left the shell behind. For a long time, it was just the two of us in that big suburban house in King of Prussia. Quiet dinners. Laundry done in silence. But Mom was still there, in a way. Her crocheted blankets draped over the couch arms. Her teacups lined up in the glass cabinet. Pressed flowers in frames she made herself, each labeled in her careful handwriting. Little notes stuck inside recipe books. The faint smell of her vanilla lotion in the linen closet. It didn't feel like living in a museum. It felt like living in a house where someone mattered. Dad didn't move anything. Not for almost 2 years. Then he met Denise. He introduced her like she was something fragile. "This is Denise," he said, with that forced brightness people use when they're scared of your reaction. "We've been seeing each other for a little while." Denise smiled warmly, like she already knew me. She had perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect teeth, the kind of woman who makes you suddenly aware you're wearing an old hoodie with paint stains on it. "I've heard so much about you," she said. That sentence always makes my skin crawl. Heard what? From who? About what version of me? I was polite. I wasn't cruel or hostile. I just kept my distance. Because every time she laughed at something my dad said, it felt like watching someone sit in my mom's seat at the table. Within a year, they were married. I was already in college by then, living in a cramped dorm room that smelled like burnt popcorn and cheap detergent, so I didn't see the transition happen day by day. I'd come home for holidays, notice small changes, then leave again before I had time to process them. Denise had a daughter too, Olivia. 11 years old when the wedding happened. Shy, thin, always clutching a book like a shield. She wasn't the problem. If anything, she looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. After graduation, reality hit. Student loans, entry-level salary, rent prices that felt like a personal attack. So when Dad suggested I move back home for a year to save money, it seemed practical. I told myself I was an adult now. I could handle it. The first thing I noticed when I walked through the front door with my suitcase wasn't what had changed. It was what was missing. The living room looked staged. Like one of those model homes where no one actually lives. New throw pillows in neutral colors. A decorative tray on the coffee table with fake succulents and books no one had ever opened. The air smelled like some artificial clean scent instead of coffee and laundry detergent and life. I glanced at the glass cabinet automatically. Empty. Not completely empty, there were things in it. Just not Mom's things. Instead of delicate mismatched teacups collected over 20 years, there were identical white dishes, perfectly spaced like a store display. I told myself maybe she'd packed them for cleaning. Then I noticed the walls. Family photos used to line the staircase, birthdays, vacations, school pictures, candid shots where no one was looking at the camera. Now they were gone. In their place were 3 large framed portraits, Dad, Denise, and Olivia smiling in coordinated blue outfits against a fake studio background. I stood there longer than I should have, suitcase still in my hand. Denise came around the corner, cheerful as ever. "Brianna, you made it. Let me take your coat." Her voice was bright, welcoming, completely normal. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just erased half the house. "Did you redecorate?" I asked carefully. "Oh, just freshen things up," she said. It was time for a change. Freshened. That word stuck in my head all night. My old bedroom was mostly the same, but even there something felt off. The quilt Mom had made me for high school graduation, navy blue with little stitched stars, was folded neatly at the foot of the bed instead of spread across it. Like decoration, not something meant to be used. I unfolded it automatically and wrapped it around my shoulders. It still smelled faintly like the cedar chest where Mom used to store blankets. Downstairs, I heard Denise and Dad talking in low voices. Not arguing. Just discussing something in that careful tone people use when they don't want to be overheard. The next morning, I found the first box. Garage. Left side. Labeled donate in thick black marker. Inside were my mom's winter coats. The red wool one she wore every Christmas. The long black one she'd saved up months to buy because she said it made her feel elegant, even if no one else noticed. I carried the box inside without asking. Denise saw it immediately. "Oh, honey," she said gently, like I'd picked up something fragile. "Those are just things we don't use anymore." My throat tightened. My mom used them. She didn't roll her eyes or snap. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, she gave me that sympathetic smile, the one that said she thought she was being reasonable. "We can't hold on to everything forever," she said softly. "Your father needs space to move forward." I looked at Dad. He was standing at the kitchen counter pretending to read something on his phone. Dad, I said. He didn't meet my eyes. Denise has a point, Bree. Bree. He only called me that when he was trying to smooth things over. It's not like we're throwing her away, he added. Just simplifying. Simplifying. That was the moment I realized this wasn't temporary. This wasn't spring cleaning. This was removal. Over the next few weeks, it happened piece by piece, quiet enough that you couldn't point to a single dramatic moment. The porcelain teacups vanished. The pressed flower frames disappeared. The recipe cards were gone from the kitchen drawer, replaced by glossy cookbooks Denise never actually used. Every time I asked, the answer was some variation of the same theme. We're reorganizing. It's healthier this way. Change can be good. The worst part wasn't Denise. It was my dad going along with it like this was normal. Like 25 years of marriage could be boxed up between Christmas decorations and old tax returns. One night, I finally cornered him in the living room after Denise went to bed. Do you want this? I asked quietly. All of it gone? He rubbed his face with both hands, looking exhausted. Brianna, it hurts to see those things every day. So the solution is pretending she never existed? That's not fair. Isn't it? He stared at the carpet for a long time before speaking again. Denise helps me focus on the present, he said. I can't live in the past forever. I didn't know how to explain that remembering someone isn't the same as living in the past. That erasing her felt like erasing me too. After that conversation, something inside me shifted. I stopped arguing. Instead, I started rescuing. A photo album slipped into my backpack when I left for work. A stack of recipe cards hidden under my mattress. The teacups wrapped in towels and smuggled out to my car in reusable grocery bags. Ethan, a friend from the vet clinic, let me store boxes in his apartment storage unit. He never asked questions. Just helped me carry them down the stairs and said, take whatever time you need. I felt ridiculous doing it. Like a burglar stealing from my own childhood. But if I didn't take those things, they would disappear. And then one evening, I came home to find the staircase walls freshly painted. No photo hooks. No marks. No outlines where frames used to hang. Just blank, beige emptiness. That's when I understood this wasn't about making room. It was about rewriting the story of who had lived there. And I realized something else too. If I stayed, eventually there would be nothing left to save. By the time the staircase walls were repainted, Denise stopped pretending she was reorganizing. Now she acted like the house had always looked this way. It was subtle, the way she did it. Not loud or confrontational. Just little comments slipped into normal conversation, like she was narrating a new reality and waiting for us to agree. One evening during dinner, she gestured around the dining room and said, I love how peaceful it feels now. Less clutter. Less heaviness. Heaviness. She didn't say my mom's name. She never did. It was always vague words, clutter, baggage, the past. Like my mother had been an inconvenience instead of a person. Dad nodded along while cutting his chicken into precise little squares. It is calmer, he said. I stopped eating. Not dramatically. I just put my fork down because suddenly the food tasted like cardboard. Olivia glanced at me nervously, then back at her plate. She had gotten taller since I'd last lived at home, thinner too, like she was trying to take up less space. No one mentioned that this piece had only arrived after one person's entire life had been boxed away. The final thing to go from the main living area was the piano. It wasn't even an especially valuable piano, just an old upright my grandparents had given Mom when she moved out on her own. She played every evening when I was little. Nothing fancy. Old songs, movie themes, whatever sheet music she could find at thrift stores. I came home from work one day, and the corner where it had stood for my entire childhood was empty. No warning. No discussion. Just gone. I walked through the house slowly, like maybe I'd find it somewhere else. As if someone could casually relocate a 300-pound instrument without noticing. Denise was in the kitchen arranging flowers. Fresh ones. She'd started doing that a lot, replacing anything handmade or personal with things that looked good in photos. Where's the piano? I asked. Oh, she said lightly, not even looking up, we donated it to a church youth center. They were thrilled. My hands started shaking. You didn't think to ask me? She finally turned, eyebrows knitting in mild confusion, like my reaction was the strange part. It was taking up space, Brianna. And no one was using it. My mom used it. Well, she isn't here anymore. The words landed softly, calmly, cruelly. Dad walked in at that moment, carrying mail. He froze when he saw my face. Denise, maybe, he started. She cut him off gently. Daniel, we talked about this. That told me everything. He had known. You said it was okay, she added, her voice sweet but firm, like reminding a child of a promise. Dad looked at me, guilt flickering across his face, then away again. It's going to a good place, Bree. A good place. Like we were discussing a pet, not something that had anchored my entire childhood. I went upstairs before I said something unforgivable. Shut my door. Sat on the floor with my back against the bed and tried to breathe. The house felt quieter than it ever had before. Not peaceful. Hollow. That night, I dreamed I was running through empty rooms, opening doors and finding nothing behind them. No furniture, no photos, no proof anyone had ever lived there. Just blank walls stretching on forever. After the piano, Denise stopped hiding what she was doing. She redecorated the living room completely, new couch, new curtains, even a different rug. The old one, which Mom had picked out because it hid stains from our dog, vanished without explanation. In its place was something pale and expensive-looking, the kind of rug that made you afraid to set a glass down without a coaster. "It's time this house reflected who we are now," Denise said one afternoon while directing 2 delivery men. "Who we are. Not who we were. Not what we lost. Just the new version. The approved version." I noticed she had started referring to the house as our home in a way that excluded me. Not openly, but in the way you might talk about something permanent, something settled. Olivia had started college visits by then, so she was rarely home. When she was, she stayed in her room with headphones on, like she was trying not to witness anything. Once, she caught me carrying a box of Mom's things down the stairs. She hesitated, then whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. She shrugged, eyes shiny. "I don't think she realizes how much it hurts you." I didn't know what to say to that. Olivia wasn't the enemy. She was just a kid stuck between loyalty to her mom and basic human empathy. "None of this is your fault," I told her. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. The breaking point came during Denise's big family dinner. She had been planning it for weeks, menus, seating arrangements, matching table settings. She even bought new dishes specifically for the occasion, sleek and modern, nothing like the mismatched plates we'd used my whole life. Relatives from her side were coming. A few from Dad's side too. It was framed as a celebration of blending families, of new beginnings. I already had a bad feeling. The house looked like something out of a magazine. Candles, flowers, soft background music. Denise moved through it like a hostess on autopilot, smiling, smoothing invisible wrinkles. People complimented everything. "This place is beautiful. You've done such an amazing job. It feels so warm." Warm. I stood near the staircase, staring at the blank walls where my childhood used to be. During dinner, someone asked Denise how long she and Dad had been married. She laughed lightly. 5 years, but honestly it feels like we've always been together. This house has really become our home. Always. I scanned the room again. The living room, the dining room, even the hallway, not a single photo of my mom. Not one object she had chosen. Not one trace she had ever lived there. 25 years reduced to storage boxes in the garage. Or worse, donation bins. My chest felt tight like I couldn't get enough air. I slipped outside onto the back porch, gripping the railing until the wood dug into my palms. Cold night air hit my face, sharp and grounding. Behind me, laughter spilled through the open door. The sound felt foreign, like it belonged to strangers. Denise followed a few minutes later, concern written across her face in a way that almost looked genuine. "Brianna, sweetheart, are you okay?" That word, sweetheart, made my stomach twist. I turned toward her, hands still shaking. "Why are you doing this?" Her expression shifted, not angry, not defensive. Just patient. Like she'd been waiting for this conversation. "Doing what?" "You erased her," I said, voice cracking despite my best effort. "There's nothing left of my mom in that house." She sighed softly, like I was misunderstanding something simple. "Your father deserves a fresh start," she said. "Constant reminders keep him trapped in grief. And Olivia deserves a stable environment too. And I don't." "You're an adult," she replied gently. "You can remember her wherever you choose. Wherever you choose. Just not here." I swallowed hard. This was her house too. Denise looked at me for a long moment, then said something so calm, so measured, it felt like a verdict. "This is my home now. No anger. No apology. Just certainty." Through the glass door, I could see Dad watching us from inside, frozen halfway between standing up and sitting back down. He didn't come out. That was the moment I stopped hoping he would protect me. Not explosive anger. Not tears. Just a cold, quiet realization that I was alone in that house. And suddenly, staying there felt impossible. Because if I stayed long enough, I wouldn't just lose my mom's things. I would lose the memory of what life looked like before Denise rewrote it. After the dinner, something inside me went completely still. Not calmer. Not healed. Just done. I stopped trying to convince anyone. Stopped pointing out what was missing. Stopped reacting when Denise replaced something else with a cleaner, newer, emptier version. It was like watching a slow demolition from inside the building. At some point you realize yelling won't stop the wrecking ball. Instead, I started planning. I didn't know what the plan was yet. Just that I couldn't stay there forever, waiting for the last pieces of my mom to vanish. Around that time, my grandmother Ruth called. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Sweetheart, are you busy?" I stepped outside the clinic during my lunch break, leaning against the brick wall while dogs barked inside behind me. "No, Nana." "What's going on?" A pause. "Then, your grandfather and we've been talking." Whenever older relatives say that, it's never about something good. They had decided to move into assisted living. Not because they wanted to. Because they couldn't keep up with the house anymore. The stairs were getting dangerous. Yard work impossible. Medical appointments increasing. The usual slow surrender to time. "We don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. My throat tightened. You're not. But they had already made the decision. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, we don't know what to do with the house. Or, everything in it. Everything. I pictured that house instantly, the creaky floors, the sun-faded curtains, the piano bench stuffed with old sheet music, the smell of cinnamon and furniture polish. It was where Mom grew up. Where every holiday happened when I was little. Where photo albums filled entire closets. And suddenly I realized something. Nothing in that house had been erased. My chest started to ache in a completely different way. Have you listed it yet? I asked. No, she said. We can't bring ourselves to. It feels like packing up our whole lives. I heard the tremor in her voice, the quiet panic behind the practicality. That's when the idea hit me. Not fully formed. Just a spark. What if you didn't sell it to strangers? I said slowly. Silence on the line. Sweetheart, she said. What if I bought it? The words came out before I could second guess them. She made a small startled sound. Oh honey, that's a lot of responsibility. I know, I said, even though I didn't. But I'm already planning to move out soon. I've been saving. And you wouldn't have to clear everything at once. It could stay, the way it is. The way it is. Not curated. Not sanitized. Not rewritten. She started crying softly. Not loud sobbing. Just the quiet kind that leaks out when someone is overwhelmed. Your grandfather got on the phone a minute later, his voice gruffer than usual. You sure about this, kiddo? No. Not even a little. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I couldn't stay where I was. Yes, I said. The logistics were messy. Meetings with the bank. Digging through my savings. Taking out a loan that made my stomach hurt just thinking about it. My grandfather insisted on selling at a family discount, saying he'd rather see it go to me than some developer who'd tear it apart. Dad didn't understand at first. You're buying a whole house, he asked one evening, sounding more confused than concerned. I can afford it, I said. Barely. But yes. Denise tilted her head slightly. That's a big step for someone your age. There was something underneath her tone, not disapproval exactly, but skepticism. Like she expected me to fail. It'll be good for me, I said. She smiled politely. Well, independence is important. No mention of missing me. No questions about why I wanted to leave so urgently. Dad asked if I was sure I didn't want to stay longer, but it sounded like obligation more than genuine desire. That hurt in a quieter way. Moving day arrived faster than I expected. I packed my clothes, books, basic furniture, all the normal things. But the most important part was the stuff I'd been rescuing for months. Boxes from Ethan's storage unit. Hidden bags from my closet. Fragile items wrapped in towels and newspaper. I loaded them carefully into my car, making multiple trips like I was transporting something sacred. Mom's teacups. Recipe cards. Photo albums. Pressed flowers. Even the ugly ceramic figurines she loved that I used to make fun of as a kid. Not because they were valuable. Because they proved she had existed. Dad stood in the driveway watching as I carried the last box to my trunk. He looked uneasy, like he knew this wasn't just a normal move out. You don't have to rush, he said. You could always come back if things don't work out. Come back to what? An empty house where my childhood had been replaced with staged photos and neutral furniture? I'll be okay, I said gently. He hugged me then, longer than usual. For a second, I thought he might say something important, an apology, maybe, or an admission that he missed Mom too. Instead, he just said, drive safe. Denise gave me a brief, polite hug. We'll have to come see the new place sometime. Something in her eyes suggested she didn't expect to be invited. Olivia squeezed me tightly. Text me when you get there. I will. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. Same structure. Same windows. Completely different home. I didn't cry. Mostly because I felt lighter with every mile. Maple Hollow was about 2 hours away, far enough to feel separate, close enough not to be dramatic. The town looked exactly like I remembered. Quiet streets, small shops, old trees arching over the road like they were trying to protect something. My grandparents' house stood at the end of a short cul-de-sac, brick faded but solid, front porch sagging slightly in the middle. The kind of house that had absorbed generations of footsteps. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the air smelled like dust, cinnamon, and something faintly floral. Memory. Furniture exactly where it had always been. Photos covering the walls. Lamps with yellowed shades. A stack of mail on the entry table because my grandparents had already started staying more nights at the assisted living place. Nothing staged. Nothing erased. I set the first box down in the living room and just stood there. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to guard anything. I unpacked slowly, placing Mom's things among the ones already there. Not in a shrine-like way. Just naturally. Her teacups next to Nana's china. Her photos tucked among older ones. Her quilt draped over the couch like it had always belonged. Because it did. By the time I finished, the house didn't look like a museum. It looked alive. That night, I sat on the couch wrapped in her quilt, listening to the old house creak and settle around me. No tense silence. No forced cheerfulness. Just the normal sounds of a place that had nothing to hide. For the first time since she died, remembering my mom didn't feel like breaking a rule. And that's when the idea for the gathering came to me. Not revenge in the dramatic sense. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted people to remember. To see what had been erased. So I started making a list of relatives. Planning the gathering felt strangely peaceful. Not exciting. Not dramatic. Just purposeful, like I was finally doing something instead of reacting to what everyone else decided. I didn't call it a party. I told people it was a housewarming, a chance to see the place before my grandparents officially handed everything over. That part was true. They were relieved someone in the family would still be living there, relieved they didn't have to watch strangers repaint the walls or gut the kitchen. Nana insisted on helping, even from the assisted living apartment. She gave me recipes, told me where extra table linens were stored, reminded me which cousins hated mushrooms and which uncle always drank too much coffee. Make it warm, she said. That's what makes a house feel like home. Warm. Not curated. Not impressive. Just warm. Over the next few weeks, I cleaned, sorted, and fixed what I could. The house wasn't falling apart, just tired. Scuffed floors, sticky cabinet doors, light fixtures that hummed faintly when turned on. I kept most things exactly as they were. Family photos stayed on the walls, grandparents, great-grandparents, black and white pictures of people I'd never met but somehow still belonged to. I added Mom's photos among them, blending her back into the timeline like she had never been removed from it. Her wedding picture with Dad went on the mantle. Not out of spite. Just because that's where it had always been in our old house. Her quilt stayed on the couch because it was soft and comforting, not decorative. Her recipe cards went into the kitchen drawer where recipe cards logically go. Nothing about it looked staged. That was the point. Ethan came over one Saturday to help me move the last heavy boxes from the garage. He stopped in the doorway of the living room, turning slowly. Wow, he said. This place feels different. Different good or different haunted? I asked. Different safe, he said after a moment. That word surprised me. I hadn't realized how unsafe my old house had felt until I didn't feel that way anymore. Your mom would have liked it, he added. My chest tightened, but it didn't hurt the way it used to. Yeah, I said quietly. I think she would. Invitations went out, mostly texts, some phone calls for older relatives. I invited Dad, Denise, and Olivia too. Not because I wanted drama, but because leaving them out would have made everything heavier than it needed to be. Dad sounded relieved. We'd love to come. Denise's voice in the background asked something I couldn't quite hear. He hesitated before adding, Denise says it sounds lovely. Not enthusiastic. Just polite. Olivia texted me separately later. I'm excited. Mom, less so. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Eventually I typed. No pressure. Come if you want to. She replied with a heart. The day of the gathering, I woke up early with that jittery feeling you get before something important, even if you can't name exactly why it matters. I baked Nana's cinnamon coffee cake, brewed way too much coffee, arranged food on platters that didn't match but somehow looked better because they didn't. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, catching dust motes in the air and making everything look softer. By the time the first car pulled into the driveway, the house smelled like sugar and vanilla and something faintly nostalgic. People trickled in slowly. Cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors who had known my grandparents for decades. The usual mix of small-town familiarity and polite catching up. Reactions were immediate. Oh, this place looks exactly the same. I haven't been here in years. Your grandmother kept everything so beautifully. Then they started noticing the newer additions, Mom's things woven into the older ones. Kelsey, one of my cousins, stopped in front of the mantle. Is that your mom's wedding photo? Yeah. She smiled softly. I always loved this picture. She looked so happy. That simple acknowledgement made my throat tight in a way I hadn't expected. More people arrived. The house filled with voices, laughter, the clink of dishes. Not forced cheerfulness, just genuine noise, the sound of people existing together without tension humming underneath. Then Dad's car pulled in. I watched through the window as he got out, adjusting his jacket like he was nervous. Denise stepped out a second later, perfectly put together as always, scanning the house with a careful expression. Olivia climbed out last, giving me a small wave when she spotted me. I opened the door before they could knock. Hey, I said. Dad hugged me immediately, squeezing tight. This place, it looks great. Thanks. Denise smiled politely. It's very charming. Charming. Neutral. Safe. Olivia hugged me too, whispering, I missed you. Missed you too. As they stepped inside, I saw the exact moment Denise noticed the walls. Not one dramatic reaction. Just a tiny pause in her stride, eyes flicking from photo to photo, recalibrating. Because unlike their house, this one told a full story. Grandparents as young parents. Mom as a kid missing her front teeth. Family reunions. School graduations. Weddings. Birthdays. And threaded through it all, my mom as an adult, laughing, cooking, holding babies, standing beside Dad in photos that couldn't be edited out without leaving obvious gaps. Dad moved slowly through the living room, his gaze lingering on everything. He stopped in front of the mantel, staring at that wedding photo like he'd forgotten it existed. Denise remained near the couch, posture straight, hands folded lightly in front of her like she was bracing for something. People greeted them warmly, pulling Dad into conversations almost immediately. Stories started flowing, memories of Mom, of earlier years, of things that had nothing to do with Denise, but weren't meant to exclude her either. It just happened. At one point I walked into the kitchen and found Denise standing alone, studying the recipe cards spread beside the stove. She had beautiful handwriting, she said without looking up. Yeah, I replied. A long pause. This is a lot, she said finally, voice low. I kept my tone even. It's just normal stuff. She turned toward me, searching my face like she was trying to figure out whether this was deliberate. It feels intentional, she said. I didn't deny it. But I didn't confirm it either. It's my house, I said gently. I decorated it with things that matter to me. That was the closest I came to calling it revenge. Not yelling. Not accusing. Just stating a fact she couldn't argue with. In the living room, Dad was laughing at something Uncle Douglas had said, but it sounded different, looser, almost surprised. Like he hadn't expected to feel comfortable. As the afternoon wore on, he relaxed more. Told stories I hadn't heard in years. Even corrected someone's memory about how he and Mom first met, adding details only he would remember. For a moment, it felt like we were back in a version of the past where everything hadn't fractured yet. Denise sat on the edge of the couch, participating politely but never fully settling in. She looked like a guest in someone else's life. Which I realized she kind of was. Not because she didn't belong anywhere. Just because this particular story hadn't started with her. As people began to leave, hugging goodbye, promising to visit again, the house slowly quieted. Dishes stacked in the sink, crumbs on the table, chairs slightly out of place, evidence that something real had happened here. Dad lingered near the doorway, glancing back into the living room one more time before stepping outside. Denise was already in the car. Olivia hugged me tightly. I'm really glad you did this. Me too. When she pulled away, her eyes were a little shiny. Dad waited until she walked ahead before speaking. I forgot how much of her there was, he said quietly. Not accusing. Not defensive. Just tired. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. He hugged me again, longer this time. Then he left. I stood on the porch watching their car disappear down the street, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Not triumph. Not guilt. Just a strange, quiet sense that something important had shifted. After the gathering, the house felt different. Not empty or calmer. Like something that had been waiting to happen finally had, and now everything could settle. I spent the evening washing dishes slowly, hands in warm soapy water, replaying moments in my head. Dad laughing. Olivia smiling without that tight, anxious edge she usually had. Denise sitting stiffly, eyes moving from object to object like she couldn't decide where to rest them. No one yelled. No one stormed out. No dramatic confrontation. But it didn't feel neutral either. It felt like something had been exposed to air after being sealed away too long. Dad started visiting about 2 weeks later. He called first, which in itself was unusual. Normally he texted or waited for holidays. Are you home? He asked. Yeah. Mind if I stop by for a bit? He showed up with a grocery bag containing coffee beans and a loaf of bread from a bakery near their house. Offerings almost. Like he wasn't sure what the rules were now. We sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee while sunlight filtered through the window. He kept glancing around, taking in details he'd seen before but maybe hadn't really looked at. It smells the same, he said finally. What does? He hesitated. Like cinnamon. And something else. Your mom used to bake on Sundays. My chest tightened, but it wasn't sharp pain anymore. More like pressure. Nana baked a lot too, I said gently. He nodded, though it didn't seem like he was really listening. He stood up and wandered into the living room, stopping in front of the mantel again. I found some more photos, he said after a minute. In a box in the garage. Thought you might want them. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, slightly crumpled. Inside were pictures I'd never seen, Mom in her 20s, Mom holding me as a baby, Mom and Dad at what looked like some office party, both of them laughing at something off camera. Why were these in the garage? I asked quietly. His mouth tightened. I don't know. We both knew that wasn't entirely true. He started coming by every few weeks after that. Sometimes with photos, sometimes with random small items, a cookbook, a scarf, an old Christmas ornament. Things that had survived the purge because they'd been tucked away somewhere inconvenient. He never stayed long. An hour, maybe 2. Enough to drink coffee, talk about neutral topics, occasionally drift into memories if something triggered them. Denise never came with him. At first I assumed she was busy. Then I realized he was coming during times when she would definitely be at work or church or running errands. One afternoon, I asked carefully, does Denise know you're here? He stared into his coffee. She knows I visit you. Not the same answer. Olivia came once too, during a break from college. She looked relieved the moment she stepped inside, like she'd been holding her breath. This place feels like a hug, she said, dropping her bag by the door. We spent hours talking about school, about stupid things on social media, about anything except the obvious tension hovering between our households. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "I wish things were simpler," she murmured. "Me too." The distance with Denise solidified into something polite and permanent. Holiday invitations became separate. Dad would come by for a few hours on Christmas Eve, then leave early because he had another dinner. Birthdays were acknowledged by text. Phone calls were rare. No open hostility. Just quiet partitioning of lives. Once, Dad admitted something that stuck with me. We were sitting on the porch watching rain fall in that slow, steady way that makes everything smell clean. "The house feels different now," he said. Different how? He struggled for the right word. Empty. Not physically. Just emotionally. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to apologize for something I hadn't caused. He rubbed his hands together, staring out at the yard. "Denise thinks I'm dwelling too much on the past lately. And are you?" He gave a tired half-smile. Maybe I never stopped. That was the closest he ever came to admitting regret. I didn't push further. Some truths come out only in fragments. A few months later, Nana passed away peacefully in her sleep. Not unexpected, but still devastating. The funeral brought everyone together again, grief flattening the invisible boundaries between families for a brief time. Denise attended, dressed impeccably in black, offering polite condolences. She didn't stay long afterward. Dad lingered. After most people had left, he walked through the house slowly, touching the back of a chair, straightening a picture frame, running his fingers along the edge of the piano bench. "This place matters," he said quietly. "I'm glad it's yours." "Me too." He looked like he wanted to say something else, something heavier, but instead he just pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you," he said into my hair. It surprised me enough that I didn't respond right away. Eventually, life settled into a new normal. Work. Grocery shopping. Paying bills. Visiting Grandpa at the assisted living center. Quiet evenings on the couch with a blanket Mom made, watching shows she would have loved and commenting to the empty room like she might somehow hear me. The house never felt haunted or frozen in time. It felt lived in. Evolving. Layers of past and present coexisting instead of competing. Sometimes I wondered if what I'd done had been cruel. Not intentionally, I hadn't set out to hurt Denise or even Dad. But I had forced a comparison into the open. A reminder that there had been a whole life before she arrived, one that couldn't be neatly replaced with new furniture and coordinated photos. Other times, I felt like I had simply refused to participate in rewriting history. I didn't sabotage their marriage. I didn't argue publicly. I didn't demand anything from anyone. I just built a home where my mom still existed. And if that made things uncomfortable, maybe that discomfort had always been there, buried under neutral paint and polite smiles. Dad looks older these days. More tired. Like he's carrying two versions of his life at once and doesn't know how to reconcile them. Denise and I exchange cordial messages on holidays. "Hope you're well. Take care." The kind of communication you could send to a coworker you barely know. Olivia visits when she can. She always lingers before leaving, glancing around like she wants to memorize the place. Sometimes she brings friends who comment on how cozy it is, how welcoming, how it feels like a real home. She smiles at that in a way that's both proud and sad. As for me, I don't feel angry anymore. Just protective. Of the memories. Of the proof that my mom was here, that she mattered, that her life didn't end the moment someone else needed space. I didn't scream. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't demand justice. I just refused to let her disappear. So I still don't know. Did I do something unfair by creating a house that centered my mom's memory, knowing it would make Denise uncomfortable and force my dad to confront things he'd rather avoid? Or was it reasonable to claim one place where she couldn't be erased, even if it changed our family forever?